All right, we're going to take a look at loops investigate. So our goal here really is to kind of give us some motivation as to why loops are useful. And so we're going to be looking at this this idea of simulations. And so in class, what we talked about was drawing from an example from statistics. So we had this situation where so you got this paper bag and you got some trading cards in there, and you got three different types of cards. One is, I don't remember what they all were, but card A, card B, and card C. And the question was, if I were to take these all, they're all in this bag that we're pulling out of. If we were to take these out one at a time, how long do you think it would take me to get one of each? And so we don't know how many cards are in there or anything. And so what we could do is we could just draw a card out and keep drawing cards until I get one of each. And so let's say the first time I do this, it takes me 9 cards, and then the second time it takes me just 5 cards, and then the next time is a big outlier, it takes me like 12 cards to do it. And so the issue is that these all take time. All these different trials that I have to run take time, and so let's say it takes 3 minutes per trial. Well, how many trials do I really need to get a good idea of what I should be able to expect for how many cards I need to draw out? In statistics, you talk about like the bigger the number, the better. And if I just do 10 trials, though, that's 30 minutes. And so what if I want to do 100 trials or 1,000 trials or even 1,000,000 trials? And that would obviously be unreasonable for us to do. So that's our motivation for talking about loops, because loops are going to allow us to simulate a task hundreds or thousands or even millions of times. Okay, well, actually way more than millions, but a whole bunch of times is the point. So we're going to navigate to lesson 6 on code.org. So let me go ahead and bring this up and get rid of that. All right, so lesson 6 on code.org. The first thing that you're going to see here is this simulator. So I'd encourage you to, if you wanted to now, pause the video and just mess with it for a little bit. So when you come back then, let's just talk about what this is doing. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. It takes in a number of, flips that I want to do. I can, 5 and 5 first try. That was good luck. Oh, and again. And I can do this, as many times as I want. And it tells me how many heads or how many tails it got based off this simulation. So I can increase it up to 100. And you'll notice that it still runs pretty quick, pretty much instantaneous. If I add another 0, go to 1,000. Also still pretty much instantaneous if I go to another 0, so 10,000. Alright, so it wasn't very long, but you could see there's a little bit of a delay there before I got my number back. If I press 0 again, so this is 100,000. Now I'm waiting for, it's probably like maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, but I had to wait a little bit to get my answer back. And obviously, if I added another 0, so what are we at? We're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is 1,000,000 now. It's going to take a little bit. It's going to take upwards of, it should take roughly 10 times longer than the previous trial did, roughly. It won't be exactly that. And so we're talking about, maybe, 15, 20 seconds here that it's going to take to run this trial. So why this is worth noting is the fact that computers are really fast, but they're not really instantaneous. They do take time to run some things, and obviously there's things that we could do to speed them up. But what we're doing is running something sequentially. So the question is, how can I use a loop to actually do this task? And so that's what I'm going to loop at in the next set. So here is the code then that I am running. So what I would encourage you to do is pause it again here and just read through the code and try to make sense of it yourself. All right, so when you come back, as we already talked about this part about how long it takes to run, 10, 100,000, 10,000 flips. So this loop, what's actually being done, the thing that's looping is this for loop right here. the setting of the heads and tails being 0 and getting the total number of flips, as well as the playing the sound and updating the screen are all outside of the for loop, because all those things only need to be done once. This for loop, on the other hand, is the thing that's going to be run through, as many times as we ask it to. And so what it does is, of course, we're not actually flipping a coin, but we're simulating flipping a coin by generating a random number here, 0 or 1. And what we've decided is that 0 will be our heads, and then 1 will be our tails. And so it just runs through this code as many times as we ask it, keeping track of how many heads and how many tails. Now, this is all making the assumption that it is exactly 50-50 chance of getting a heads or getting a tails. But this is what's going to simulate it for us, and the computer can obviously run through this very quickly, which is great. Let's see, did I answer all the questions? We've already talked about that. I'm not going to make the changes. Okay, so let's look at another app then that also makes use of simulations. Or not simulations, but loops. So again, I'm going to encourage you to pause the video here, read through the questions, try to answer them, but, well, of course, first, actually just play around with the app and see how it works. And I'm going to tell you about the things that I think are clever here and are good things to take away for how to write this code. Okay, so now that you guys are back, what this does for me is I can type in something and it automatically doesn't just fill in one of the boxes, but fills in all the boxes at once. And so that's actually where my looping is coming in, is that whenever I have text input, so in this on event, what it's doing is that it's looping through all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the different fonts here and displaying the text. All right, so here's the clever part, at least what I think is the clever part, is, normally if you were naming these boxes, you'd probably name this like the Arial text box and the Georgia text box and the comic text box. But what they decided to do instead was call this text 0 and text 1 and text 2 and 3 and 4. And the reason for that is because over here in my code, whenever I try to set the property of a text box, what it does is the very first input is a string that contains the name of the text box. And so a way of iterating through each of my text box is by taking the word text, that string, and concatenating it with, I don't want to move it, concatenating it with my current index. And so this is kind of a clever way of doing this, is that I'm kind of like iterating through variables that are created then, and not through and like a list, for example, which is something we're going to be doing later. So each of these does it. The slider and a drop down, of course, and yeah, so that's the kind of the clever part here. What else do I need to talk about? Let's see. So we found the loops. We figured out this part. Obviously, if I change the name, I have to change the name of the text box and the code in here, the strings. Yeah, okay, so that's all really this lesson is. There's not a lot to it other than just you guys getting some more experience with what loops look like and how we can use them. But this last thing is a clever takeaway that we should be able to use later. So yeah, loops are a very powerful thing. They allow us to repeat code thousands or millions or billions or even trillions of times in a pretty quick manner. And it's all relative, of course, but it's a lot quicker than what we could do it in. And so the next thing we'll do is, of course, get a lot of practice with this, but that'll be our next lesson.